Kirsteen Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. I think you've all mentioned the skills gap, and we know that is particularly acute when you're looking at advanced manufacturing, welding, fabricating, and the Withers Review came out some years ago now, and I think there were hopes at that time that the landscape would change on the back of that. Do you think that there's sufficient understanding within government of the skills gaps in the sector? I'll put that to yourself.
Shall I begin? I think there's a level of understanding of the gap. Whether there is enough action is a different matter. I think if I look at it from a pure business case perspective, for me it's absolute common sense, logical sense that even when you look at the basic level of the tax take from having a skilled worker coming through the business, the return on investment is absolutely clear. These skills in defence are generally higher paid skills. They generate significant return to the UK economy as well. And yet, when you look at the statistics, they are, particularly in Scotland, they are less than 50% planned to train, in the sense that we are undergunning our training in these skills. And for us, it tends to be in the areas of things like software, firmware, electronics, some of these kind of higher engineering skills. And we are highly competing with sectors that we never used to, pharmaceuticals, oil and gas, all sorts of sectors that are obviously using engineering skills now. So engineering is a winner in terms of a career to go into, whether it be in defence or elsewhere, and yet we're not supporting that as a nation effectively enough. So we're not getting enough people into those planned training programmes, and we're not seeing enough of the funding that's levied on early careers returning back to funding of the colleges, of the universities, and obviously the employers. And I think at the heart, to pick up with us, it absolutely has to be employer-led and employer-demand-led, because we know best what we need now and what we're going to need in the future, and we certainly need more.
So there's a lack of joined-up thinking there. It's quite fragmented, or do you think there's no strategic vision of what that should be, or do you think it was set out in vision in Withers but not enacted upon?
I think it hasn't been enacted yet, and I think and certainly not fully. I think there was an acknowledgement of the findings of Withers and an intent to enact, but we haven't seen it play out. And certainly in terms of the ground truth of the numbers of people, we are not seeing the numbers of people. We're seeing enough applicants, but we're not seeing the number of places being generated to support our needs for the future. And of course, it's not just about defence. Engineering, as I say, is multi-sector, and we would hope that they enter lots of careers across lots of engineering disciplines. I would say that as an engineer myself, and maybe they end up in defence, maybe they don't, but fundamentally they'll end up in high-skilled, strong career prospects that generate return for them, generate return for the country. So coming back to the business case perspective, the common sense business case is absolutely obvious and apparent that we should be and need to be more coordinated and invest more strongly and faster in generating those skills for the future.
Thank you.
I'd agree with what Mark was just describing there. Also, just thinking more broadly, a lot of the skills that we need in defence are STEM-related skills. And as a society, I fear, and I'm also an engineer, that we do undervalue these scientific skills. Mm-hmm. So if you were to ask school children, which I have done, what job do you want to do? We're competing with other more attractive opportunities there. So we need to raise as a society the benefits of working in science and engineering. So that's all the way through our school system, our universities and colleges, and encourage them to demonstrate what the great opportunities are for delivering amazing things that society fundamentally needs. And so for me, it's a societal challenge that we collectively have. And for us in the defence industry, we do have these highly skilled roles that take a long time to nurture. You don't just come out of a production line knowing how to do these specialist skills. So it is a long-term investment that we put in place in our company, and as we need to do in defence as well, to ensure that we have that pipeline. And we are competing with those other markets. I sit on an industry advisory board with UCL, and a lot of the graduates coming off engineering programmes are more attracted to financial jobs where they transfer those skills there, perhaps with higher wages than the defence industry is able to offer. And so we are competing in a broader stage, and our role here is to really demonstrate the value that those skills bring to our defence economy and the exciting and amazing careers that people can have.
Yeah, so I think it's understood and valued. I think partly so, but there's definitely more to do. That's one of the reasons in Glasgow we built an applied shipbuilding academy. We have over 500 people in early careers, and we recruit nearly 200 a year. And as part of that, we've got to grow and nurture this thing. We actually have a huge number of applicants for the roles that we have, so there is a huge pool for it. But the sustainability of work, of building and investing, and then we can build out of that to do other things, is deeply important, and it's a hugely valuable place for the government to invest. And I just, from a personal point of view, I was out of a shipbuilding academy about a month ago, and the school from where I grew up, the kids from that school were in it, and every single one of them came out absolutely buzzing. We do over 20,000 STEM interactions a year, and I think grasping that imagination of the next generation. So this is the sort of thing they want to do. I did engineering in Glasgow, but I actually moved to England after that, and it's great to be back in Glasgow, and it's great that we're building careers in Scotland for the people who have been trained in Scotland.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I'll pick on a sort of short-term issue and then the sort of longer-term, maybe systemic thing. We absolutely do have a skills gap. I think everyone understands it. In fact, I was at a joint breakfast yesterday talking about this very topic. ADS, the trade body, are monitoring 10,000 live vacancies at the moment in the sector. Again, back to my, I've said it a number of times, my ecosystem thing. If I look around our major employment sites in Scotland, we like BAE, we don't struggle for applicants. So this year we'll take on probably 150 apprentices. We've got 3,500 people have applied for those 150 apprenticeships. Now when you then start to move away from where the defence industry operates, you start to get into the perception issue. There is no doubt that defence has a perception problem. Some of that starts in schools. There are, I think we sometimes ideologically teach people that defence is bad and unethical, and so trying to recruit people into defence away from those employment centres, I think, brings with it its own challenges. Our view is over the next sort of decade, we alone need 3,500 to 4,000 people in Scotland based on normal attrition rates, simply because we've got a whole generation that are about to start leaving the workforce. And as my colleagues have said, these are highly paid, highly skilled jobs where the trickle-down benefit into the economy is much greater than it is for some of those sort of less complex roles. Long-term contracts help. So at the moment in Rosyth, we will need to start thinking about whether we take on more apprentices, because the Type 31 frigate programme will come to an end and there's no UK programme yet to follow on behind that. We're working really hard on export programmes because we don't believe we should just sort of sit and wait for government handouts, but it's really important for us that we don't bring in early careers workers without that certainty that there's a job at the end of it for them. On the short-term piece, I would just flag, I think both we and BAE got some regional headlines about employing foreign workers, and I think there's a perception issue that people assume we bring in workers from the Philippines because they're cheap slave labour. Absolutely not true. We bring in workers who are paid exactly the same rates of pay as our UK workers, and we bring them in because there are no UK workers to employ. So what we're doing is, a bit like BAE with their academy, we are bulking up on the apprentices and the graduates we bring in to try and fill those gaps, persuade people that an apprenticeship to become a welder is a really valuable future career for them. They don't need to go and do a social science degree at university. They can come and do a modern apprenticeship. But in the short term, we have to rely on those foreign workers. Right now, there is obviously Brexit brought a challenge to bringing in those workers. That challenge is about to get much worse. The government are about to change the English language requirement to require B2. So we will be trying to bring in welders who've got the same level of English as a university lecturer. And it actually will be massively damaging for the shipbuilding industry in Scotland. So we are working with government just now, with the Minister for Migration, trying to find ways to make that work. We recognise what government policy is, but we need to watch out for the law of unintended consequences.
Thanks for that. So just picking up on that bit about getting more young people into the sector, you've previously described the current information on the defence workforce requirement in Scotland as fragmented. So what work have you done to engage with the government to help address or improve understanding of the skills gaps in the sector? And I do appreciate, as you mentioned, that there is a perception issue that has to be challenged as well. So what are you doing to make it clearer to young people that this is a good route for them and a long-term, good long-term career prospects for them?
So we've done a number of things. So one of my other roles is I co-chair the Defence Industrial Joint Council Delivery Group with the National Armaments Director. Through there we have a skills and training working group. We're rolling out a programme called Destination Defence, which is all about trying to shift perceptions about the defence sector, the exciting jobs that are available in there. So there's a whole series of sort of industry-wide initiatives that everyone's bought into. For us specifically, I think we've done two things that I think we're really proud of to try and move the dial. One of them is we've launched a programme called Production Support Operatives, which is where we effectively target people who are currently not in education, employment or training to bring them into the workforce or bring them back into the workforce. And we've so far brought in 300 people into our Rosyth business through that route. They're what we might have traditionally called semi-skilled roles, but they open up a career path for people who then want to move on. We've got an equivalent programme now rolling out on the submarine base on the Clyde. So those are two programmes that are trying to sort of do something different. The other thing that's been really successful for us is we launched a pre-apprenticeship programme, which in Argyll and Bute targeted school children aged between 14 and 16 and was aimed at giving them a taste of the industry in the hope that they would then sign up to a modern apprenticeship. And that's been really successful. Nearly 92% of the people who've gone through that programme then went on to apply for and get modern apprenticeships with us. So I think what we can't do is just sit and do the traditional things of fighting it out amongst other sectors to see who can pay the most, who's got the most attractive employment conditions. We have to find ways of bringing people into the sector who otherwise wouldn't have considered a job in defence. I think that one final point I'd make is, I know the government are painfully aware of this. In the further and higher education sectors, it costs way more money to train an engineer than it does to put somebody through a social science degree or qualification. And it often costs way more money than the funding that's available allows. So universities and colleges are always trying to strike that balance. What industry, I think, is doing is leaning in more to try and provide other avenues for those people to get into the workforce, rather than just having to rely on traditional education programmes.
And do you think both UK and Scottish governments are live to these issues and working on them?
Yeah, and in fact, at a Scottish government level, I mean, we've had discussions recently with both the Deputy First Minister and the First Minister, and actually it's a topic that we all agree on, that there is a skills challenge, and that actually the economic impact of those jobs is disproportionately high. I mean, all of the economic assessments we do show the trickle-down effect. I mean, we employ 5,000 people in Scotland, but we support 10,500 jobs. because of the impact those jobs then have on the wider economy and the supply chain and the indirect spend in local businesses. So these jobs are really valuable, and therefore the benefit to the Scottish economy of creating more jobs in defence is disproportionately high.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kirsteen Sullivan.
So just to further expand on the proposal for a defence skills passport, how do you think that this could address the skills gap? And I'll start with yourself, Mr. Stead.
The Defence Skills Passport, so I think it's a helpful, useful initiative, because obviously offering people a fast path and a recognition of their relevant skills, for instance, whether they've been in armed forces or other relevant industries, that they can access defence opportunities quickly and they're known to us. And I think that's part of the equation, is it makes it easier for them to be known to us and access us through the right paths. You know, big defence companies can be quite confusing to, and that's part of our job, to make that easier to navigate, but it can be quite confusing how to access, where to see opportunities, who to speak with. And I think Defence Skills Passport initiative and other things, the technical colleges and the funding and the research allocations as well, all combine together to fundamentally make it easier, I think, for relevant skills, people with relevant skills, to find their way to our door, and that can only help.
Thank you.
I would agree with that. And so in terms of broader defence skills, we need to look more broadly than some of the traditional manufacturing capabilities and skills. We need to look to some of these new advanced skills like digital skills, data analytics. In our particular area, we have lots of skills in acoustics and magnetics, radio frequency, so very highly specialised, highly skilled roles that we operate in. And so actually having the opportunity to broaden the Defence Skills Passport to encapsulate some of these would be really beneficial. And I think, just building on the previous conversation, highlighting that these are really exciting and interesting careers that people can have. And actually, the defence industry, whilst there might be a lot of people in it, it's a relatively small community. And we will pop up in different companies through time, and actually recognising the value of the skills that you've learnt as you move through the industry, and ensuring that people retain in the industry, to me, is a really important part of this, because some of these skills, as I mentioned earlier, are very specific to the sensitive work that we collectively do, and ensuring that we don't lose it from the industry is a really important part. So extending the Defence Skills Passport to perhaps broaden the skills capabilities, enabling us to use that across industry and to be able to make sure that we retain them across the enterprise, is something that I would very much support.
Yeah, I think we very much support it in principle. I think how it would work is going to be key, and what purpose has it got. So for instance, is the passport allowed easy movement of people across defence because of security clearances and the potentially the skills that go with it? I would say, though, if it was something that constrained people coming into defence, then that may be something that we need to look at, because I think a lot of our skills are very much transferable. We take people from wider construction, transportation and energy as well. And I think looking at how that can be a real turbocharger for growth around core skills in defence that can have a wider benefit to the economy would be really useful.
I just ask you on that point how you would envisage it sitting alongside the energy skills passport.
I think
I think we've identified across sectors that it's the same core skills that are lacking.
Yeah, very much so. And I've run major programmes in railway transportation. I ran the Trans-Pennine route upgrade before I came back to BAE Systems, and a huge number of the skills, particularly in trades, are absolutely transferable. So I think in looking at these 2 or 3 different types of passports, having clarity that this type of skill in that passport is comparable to another would be really helpful.
Thank you.
I guess I would say probably sort of four things. The first one is, I think one of the real values of a Defence Skills Passport is keeping people who are already in the sector in it, so they don't migrate elsewhere. The second one actually is the point about the role of veterans. We're the largest employer of veterans in the UK. They bring valuable skills that they've learned in the armed forces, and giving them a route to not only find an easy path into industry, actually might help retention, because they can stay in the Navy or the Army a bit longer, knowing that they've got a secure job to go to in the industry. But it also helps with the concept they had of zigzag careers. So what's to stop someone coming out of the armed forces, going into Leonardo for 2 years, going back into the military and taking those industrial skills with them, and then coming back out to industry later? So it helped with that. As it's envisaged, it should cover adjacent sectors, the ability to bring people in and to ease the migration. But I agree with Neil, you've got to watch that we don't end up with death by 1,000 well-intentioned initiatives, and that these things can work in harmony. And I guess that takes me to my fourth point, which is if people do leave the sector, then we do want them to do what Neil did and see the light and come back in, and making it easier for them to come back into the industry, I think, is quite important.
You raised an important point there about veterans, because we've all heard about the challenges a lot of them face in transitioning to civilian life, and one of those challenges may be other employment opportunities. So if they had a role in this, it might make that transition a lot easier, and also that their valuable skills aren't lost from the sector. So just to go back to the perception issue, ADS Scotland explained to this committee how public perceptions are impacting operations and recruitment for many SMEs, and you've all, I think all of you have mentioned it this morning. However, you've also said that you continue to have huge demand for roles when they're available. So how is the perception issue manifesting as a challenge in your operations and recruitment? Start with yourself, Mr. Stead.
Sure. A couple of points I'd make is the SMEs, the supply chain, I think feel this even perhaps harder than we do, because if you're looking at starting a small business or just recruiting a handful of people to do something specialist, and you can do that in defence and suffer potentially being smashed up as a site, have the stigma associated with that, the chances are you may choose a different sector to work in. And I think this is why the perception factor is really important. As I said, the people who work for us are fiercely proud of the difference that they make every day, and I'm humbled by that all of the time, but they don't often feel they can shout about it. Clearly there are some reasons sometimes for security purposes that they can't, but we need more, obviously, UK nationals. It's not work that we can do overseas. It's not work that we can farm out even for people to work at home necessarily on. They need to be on secure sites often to do the work that we do, which attracts a level of attention as well. But fundamentally, if I look at, as a comparator, for instance, to the US, and let's ignore the current sort of politics around all of that, but the US defence industry has a huge level of pride, not just for itself, but in the communities that it supports and serves as well, and they staunchly support the defence industry in and around them. And I think here in UK we don't quite have that yet, but I think there's a real opportunity through government, industry and academia working together with local and regional governments as well, to really bring that to the table about how important defence is, both from the economic standpoint but from that national resilience standpoint as well. And I think we can turn the tide on that then to counter some of the perceptions, but they're very real effects on the choices that people and small businesses make as well.
I'm going to pull on Mark's comment about having people from the UK with the appropriate ability to get security clearance. I mentioned earlier that I sit on an industry board with UCL, and a vast number of the students on the course come from overseas countries. And so therefore, for us as a defence industry, being able to pull on people that come off of these programmes and bring them into our industry is a challenge, because we do work on these sensitive programmes. So to me, encouraging people in the UK to continue with those professional careers in those STEM subsets that we've already talked about is really, really key. Helping them to see the attractive careers in defence that are available to them. And there is something about that perception, as you were just reflecting upon, whereby we need to help people to see that actually what we're doing really is important for us as a country. It's important for Scotland as a region. It underpins roles, it underpins our communities. If I reflect on some of the sites that we have the privilege to work in, we have people, again, very, very proud for the work that they do, very keen to be playing a role in society. And actually for us to retain those skills in those communities becomes a challenge more broadly for things like having the appropriate infrastructure for our people that live in those remote regions, making sure they've got the basics to things like access to hospitals nearby or appropriate schools nearby for their families. So having these highly skilled roles has a broader implication. So how do we attract them in the first place? How do we retain them once they're there? How do we make sure that the infrastructure around them supports them operating in these remote places?
Yeah, I think it's very multidimensional. I mean, the first one is almost morale of our workforce. I think what we do is incredibly important. But if there's a stigma around what people do, then maybe they're not as proud of it as they could be. I think I'd like to talk about diversity a little bit as well. We operate in hugely diverse areas of Scotland, particularly in and around Glasgow. And whilst we've been working extremely hard and have been very successful increasing the diversity of our workforce, we don't yet absolutely reflect the diversity of some of the communities we work in. And I think some of that could be down to that stigma as well. So I think pushing really hard to say that this is a really important thing for the success of the country and the defence of the country will really make a difference in that.
Do you think, particularly in these really traditional sites like in Glasgow, there's a bit of a hangover of what maybe the Glasgow shipyards used to be like, and maybe some of those perceptions endure and can put off younger people, more women, people from different ethnic communities?
There is definitely a perception that this is a really traditional industry and we do steel bashing, and there is quite a bit of steel involved in the products that we make. But at the same time, these are really complex, high technology, high complexity jobs that are very fulfilling for people. And I think when people come and see it, we did almost over 20,000 STEM engagements with individuals last year. They absolutely light up, but it's only at that point. I had my kids at a family day maybe 6 months ago, and they were wide-eyed the whole time. But I think we see it as traditional Clyde shipbuilding, which isn't what it is anymore. We have robotics, as Babcock have invested hugely in that as well. We do a huge amount of engineering. The system integration and complexity is massive. So I think the more we can do to show that this is a modern industry with modern jobs that are very sustainable and can be transferable to other industries and give people great careers, the better.
Yeah, I think key to that is getting people in the door to see it, because certainly when I visited BAE and Babcock previously, it was nothing like what I thought it was going to be, not at all. So yeah, that definitely changed any unconscious perceptions that I had. Mr. Howie?
So I think you made a valid point that we don't struggle to recruit people generically, but a bit like Neil's example, we're very mindful that we are in an industry more broadly that is still male dominated, and has some perception issues around it. So we've done, as an employer, we've done a lot to modify our employment policies to make it easier for women to join the company, and more importantly to stay once they get there. Companies often fail because their employment policies don't really reflect the fact that women tend to be primary carers for children, for parents, etc. And it makes it so some of the flexible working policies, some of the maternity policies are making it easier for women to come and work for us and to stay there. We've got specialist groups, one of which I chair, looking at how we support people with neurodiversity, people with different ethnicities, where again, because we are a predominantly, historically white, middle-aged male sort of population by stereotype, it's really easy to have policies and to have cultural things that actually don't work for other people, and for it to be completely unintentional. I think someone else made the point that the place where the perception thing I think really hits is in the role of small and medium companies. I've been involved with work with DVT and the Treasury looking at how the defence industry is financed. SMEs today, some people they find landlords that will not rent property to defence companies. There are challenger banks that will not give employees of defence companies a bank account, and we can sit and say, look, there is no ethics issue with defence. Defence is a mandate from a democratically elected government, and if the government says it's important, then it's not only ethical, it's entirely legal. But when your bank won't give you a bank account, that must rub off on people and make them a bit twitchy. And it is very different between the UK and the US. I've spoken to investment managers in the US who say they have a patriotic duty to invest in defence because the armed forces are an extension of the country. And I've spoken to people in the UK who almost look with distaste at the idea that we might be creating new weapons of mass destruction. So I think there is a cultural thing we've got to get past, but some of it is on government, and some of it is on industry and individual employers.
So earlier in this session you mentioned destination defence.
Yeah.
Do you think that's enough to change it?
I think it will help. I mean, it's building on. There's already a running initiative called I think the Destination Nuclear, or I can't remember the precise term, but it was the same idea of the recognition that people weren't naturally inclined to go and work in the nuclear sector, either in defence or in civil. And so, a number of prominent companies like ourselves and EDF and others invested directly in helping promote the nuclear sector, and it did drive up the number of people applying for jobs in the sector, because often they just weren't aware A, they existed, and B, what they did. And in the same way that shipbuilding's got this legacy of is it people with oily boiler suits riveting things, I think destination defence will help explain the fact that these are highly skilled jobs using the latest technology, and maybe not at the sort of the bleeding edge of technology, but certainly at the bleeding edge of technology application.
Thank you. Do you have a view on that?
Well, I think the technology side is hugely important. Again, I come back to John's point there, is how do we genuinely understand the levels of technology and innovation that go into what we do? And in doing that, I think it'll be a far more attractive place for people to come.
Thank you. I think my colleagues have said most of the relevance there.
Do you have anything to add to that?
I'll just say that I think it's true of all of our companies here. We do genuinely world-leading things that are very differentiated globally, and we do exist in a global market as well, and that means that the work that our people do is exciting, fulfilling, makes a difference, and they can see the end effect, of course, at the sort of strategic level, as well as day to day in operations that are happening right here, right now, and therefore I think there is a strong connectivity with what we do in our place in the world, and we fight far and punch well above our weight in that, but we need to convey that more strongly and more coherently, I think, as a nation, to the people that we need in the future.